Hello, and welcome back to the reMothering Masterclass with me, Simona Vivi H. Today, I am joined by Dr. Nicole LePera, also known as the Holistic Psychologist. And I'm about to introduce her, but I'm just excited. Uh, for the over 7 million of us that follow Nicole on Instagram or that have read her amazing books, best-selling books, or have been part of her self-healer circle, you are already knowing that we are in for a treat today. But if you have not yet come across Nicole's work, I'm really excited to introduce you to this empowering, incredible body of work, which you can find in her books, which we'll talk about in a moment, and you can see right behind her, and you can find publicly online on social media, as well as in her self-healer circle membership. Dr. Nicole, thank you so much for coming to speak directly with our remothering community today. Really such a treat and an honor to talk to you.
Oh, of course, Simona. Thank you all for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
Mm. So I already told Dr. Nicole this, but I have notes because I get nervous. You can see, and every once in a while I will breathe so that I can tend to my inner parts. But this is very exciting. I wanted to share with you, Dr. Nicole, and everybody my intentions for this time together. I have three intentions, and if there's anything you want to add or adjust, let's do that before we dive in. So I have three. One is to chat about your upcoming book. At the time of this recording, it hasn't come out yet. I'm so excited about it. How to Be the Love You Seek. So excited. So chat about that. My second intention is to highlight and underline from your full body of work how the work can support us on our remothering journeys. And my third intention, which sometimes I forget to have joy, is to just enjoy this moment of virtual community, connection, all of us together here. And so I thought I'd leave that as an intention so that I don't forget to take it in. So is
Beautiful
there
intentions. No, I would not add anything. The relevance of remothering on my own continued journey of healing is so present to me. So absolutely, as is your reminder of joy, having found my own way back into joy and being in presence and appreciation and gratitude for all that is. So this, I'm having chills. It's very meaningful. I'm resonating. Let's do this.
all right, let's do this. Thought since at the time of this recording, the new book's not out yet, I would lead us in through with a quote from the Orange Book. This is Nicole's New York Times bestselling How to Do the Work. I have to keep looking at the title because in my household it's called the Orange Book. But so what I thought I would do, let me just pull my notes so I can share with you about the quote that I want to share with you. I picked a quote because it touches on the themes of both relational health and the importance of us having us, which is something we talk a lot about during the remothering masterclass. So I could have pulled from, so I don't know if everyone can see this, like the amount of underlines and highlights and dog ears, but I'm pulling from, I'm going to be reading from slash paraphrasing a section. It's not a pull quote, it's a whole little paragraph, page 252. Or night glasses would probably be a good idea. So achieving intimacy requires expressing your authentic self, as shadowy as it often can be. I love that. Without fear of being misunderstood or facing reproach or retribution. When we are in a safe space of mutual respect, I love that too. We can express our divergences without fear and still return to homeostasis. And then here's like all the yellow. This is all in yellow. This next part I'm about to read. This knowledge that we have a core resting state within reach, core resting state within reach, gives us the flexibility to tolerate discomfort. Love that too, because it's not saying we're never going to be in discomfort. It's like to tolerate the discomfort. These cycles of experience with moments of dysregulation leading to moments of co-regulation help all of us develop a core belief and trust in our internal resources. So that over to you. Like, what can we say? I mean,
I
I feel like we could talk about that for 2 hours, though. But what do we want to say about that?
Well, I'm really struck actually, Simone, at that particular quote because so much of what was shared in there, right? This idea of our own ability, and more often, I should say, than not our own inability, or at least believed inability to actually create or to feel within reach of that internal state. And what, as you beautifully note it, right? What stress resilience, or what the point of navigating or what we're supposed to do with our emotions really is, because it isn't to just get rid of them. We can't do that. And also what the point of relationships are. And it's to actually relate to other different individuals who have different thoughts and feelings and perspectives and lived experiences and ways of seeing the world. And in my opinion, and in a model of interdependence, that is where true collaboration and harmony really occurs. And ultimately, though, so many of us, as even adults, and we feel very shameful, I think, about this reality. At least speak from my experience, especially being a clinical psychologist. Right, I should just know how to navigate my emotions, and the reality of it is we don't feel within reach of that space. We aren't interacting with different others. We don't feel safe to. We've learned a conditional version of love. And again, I'm loving that paragraph because everything that it's describing, the next book, How to Be the Love You Seek, is really a deep dive into that. First, answering
Mhm.
the question of, well, why can't we, right? Why don't ideas about relationships, even really helpful books about relationships, even as I once was a couples therapist, right? Having a supportive space. Why am I still struggling in relationships? And if, again, diving deeper in I love your concept of, right, this idea of us. Why am I struggling in relationship with myself first and foremost? Therefore, then I'm struggling right in relationship with other people. It's beyond just knowing the tools, and it really, again, the new book provides a deep dive into we're stuck because of how we're wired. We're stuck because for many of us, states of nervous system dysregulation that we're born out of lacking emotional safety and security in childhood. And so many of us are playing roles. We don't know who we are in relationships. We're looking right for this transactional approach, this idea of someone is going to make me feel better. And
Mhm.
we understand, I think, differently. I'll always break change down into really two simplified steps. When we have a new understanding of ourselves, why it is that we're stuck in the ways that we are, again, to apply it to the new book, why our relationships are stuck. I love that a new kind of global term has become cycle breaking, right? Why there are even cycles passed through generations that we can't break. And then, even more so, as I will always tend, take that next step because many of us want to actually create change, right? We don't want to just know better. We want to do differently. So ultimately, how do I then do differently? And in my opinion, the conversation has to include our whole self, the physical vessel that we're living in, that for many of us is carrying the trauma that prevents us, the soul or spirit or whatever you want to call it, in my opinion, that lives in our heart, the most energetically powerful organ in our body that so few of us are connected to. And how do we really find our way back in not only relationship with ourself? I think that's where my book is a little different than most relationship books. It really leans into, we do talk a lot about relating to others, though, again, I love the alignment here because it really begins with, well, how am I relating to my own internal world, my own thoughts, my own perspectives? Do I even know what they are? Or do I know how to navigate my feelings? Do I know how to be myself so that then I can,
Oh,
create
yes.
these authentic relationships? And if the answer is no, as I imagine it might be for many listening, that's a beautiful place to start. The answer was no for me. I didn't know who I was. I was operating in all of these conditioned ways, right? Seeking this fulfillment outside of myself for so long.
While I did not know myself, I for sure, if you asked me, it would have been like, "Yes, I do. I
Oh
am the
my gosh,
person
I was
that
a
is."
psychologist. And I actually knew prescriptions for you because you were the problem, and I was gonna tell you exactly how to create my solution for me. So I love that you added that.
There were so many, like, as we were talking, I'm like, "Don't take notes that you can take later when you're listening. Only take notes of things that you want to unpack." And you said so many things. I like, there are so many threads that I would love to pull on, and I just wanna take a minute to breathe and decide. I feel like a person in my favorite shelf of a bookstore trying to decide, like, what's next, because I'll just name a few things that I heard. Well, I heard a lot of things, but a few threads that maybe we could pull and see where it takes us, 'cause a lot of different things were popping in my head. Once, you're talking about the interdependence and collaboration, and that's so powerful. And as we have that internally, we can have that more externally. But then the other thing that popped at the same time is some of us are, while the remothering work, and we talk about this at the beginning of the masterclass, is not a report card in the parenting we did or did not receive. It's about a relationship between us and us. Our personal histories will impact the remothering journey. So for some of us, we don't come from vibrationally healthy, relationally healthy families. So it's two different things. There's like the interdependence in a community of folks that have started doing their work. And then there's the interdependence in a not necessarily low vigilance relationships. That's one thing that popped into my ears. And then when you were talking about playing our roles, so many of us in our community were raised to be good daughters, good girls, good boys. So that role when you said, "So do we know who we are?" If you'd asked me who I was at any age before I started my work, which started, how old is my daughter? 20. So 20 plus years ago in a conversation that said, "I'm pregnant." Oh, I was gonna say, "I'm leaving you now." I don't know. Okay. Like that's how my work started. Really. Like, "Oh, I'm not a wife, mother, provider, like, I'm a person who's about to be left and still all the other things." So, it was like so the roles that we play. And so I those are 2 very different thing and then understanding ourselves. There was more than that, but I think I there's some threads in there that we can maybe
Yeah.
pull on.
I could actually weave a connection. I think these threads are much more twined together than I think on the surface, because how we relate to our community, just starting with this interdependent piece, which very few of our communities and globally as a collective, I don't believe we're aware and moving toward an interdependent relationship, though. How we show up in any group of others is informed by how we relate it in that first relationship, in that first environment, whatever the vibration was or wasn't, impacted by, the awareness that the generations came before us have had, the access, to different tools and resources that they have had, and really informed, again, as I often do, talk about the physiology and informed by now what we know to be true of science, which is the actual epigenetic influence of the circumstances of those who lived before us. This is again exactly how cycles are passed on. Is for a while we thought of this idea of genetic determinism, where your genes pretty much were your be all end all story, and our genes play a role, but what also plays a role are the environments that those genes were being expressed in. And for a lot of us, and this is again what puts the blinders that I referenced earlier, when you're saying, "Oh, yes, I'm very self-aware, just like I once was." We're blind to ourselves, and we're blind within our families as well. We only know the world through the experiences that which we had. And this, kind of similarity in environment, in ways individuals are showing up, for me at least, I'll speak from my own perspective, is confusing. It does, on a surface level, then strengthen this idea using my example, right? My whole family's anxious. We're anxious particularly on health. We have a lot of health anxiety, right? There's a lot of health related issues in actual, in my family structure growing up. So of course, before long, and really for me, it was upon birth, I was a very anxious child. So of course, right, we have this idea, and then the way I adapt it to relate, because in childhood, we're completely dependent on some version of a caregiver, how absent or present they were, how capable they were, what tools and resources, it didn't matter. We needed them to continue to keep us alive, really, just when it comes down to it. So that's really where those adaptations occur. We can't change our environment. We're developmentally immature, which complicates matters, because from birth until about age 7, again, I'm going to dive back into the brain,
Yeah.
we don't have the ability, we don't have the maturity and the ability to kind of zoom out like we can develop in adulthood and understand all of the different contextual reasons and nuanced reasons and reasons that have nothing to do with us why a parent might leave, or a parent like my mom might be physically present, but emotionally so shut down, right? In that immature state, and seeking what we all seek is certainty, right? Predictability, because we're all driven to survive. The more I can predict what happens next and make sense of it, the safer I become. We assign, in that egocentric state is what it's called, we assign a ego-based meaning, meaning we're the cause of everything that is happening or not happening around us. Right. So now, if we have this belief that our parents' inability or whatever it was, that actually has nothing to do with us, has something to do with us, now we have a recipe to actually modify ourselves, because we think if we just stop being so dramatic, right? Being so explosive, whatever it is that we were told, or maybe it's not even something as directly said to us, right? Maybe like me, we had a parent who was withdrawn or even explosive. We become really aware, hypervigilant, attuned to what causes their withdrawal, because that's unsafe. I lost my connection, or their explosion, because that's also unsafe. I'm
Yes.
now on the receiving end of very explosive behavior. Now again, our best thing we can do, our best adaptation, it's actually a gift, is we can become so aware and not do the things or do the things that keep that connection. Right. So now we have this recipe for, again, a belief. I'm the cause of the problem, so I have to modify it myself. And of course, I'm simplifying all of this. And
Yeah.
then we have the action of this modification and trying to connect in any way that we can. And then we have all of these behavioral ways that we're trying to make sense of and navigate very overwhelming emotions when we don't have that grounded caregiver to help us develop that emotional resilience on our own. And now we have that recipe to have a self, as I call them in the book, or really an adapted way of being. Like you're saying, many of us are continuing as that. I only know myself as the caretaker for others. For me, I only knew myself for a very long time as the achiever, right? The person who's just marching down my line of endless accomplishment, checking boxes. So, not so surprising, though I had none of this awareness, none of this language at the time. But when I, if you did read the Orange Book, as we often refer to it in my home as well, I'm having a giggle about that. I begin the book with a story of me literally in a breakdown state over a bowl of oatmeal. And that really was emblematic of probably several months, if not a better part of a year, where I was hitting what I would call or going through my dark night of the soul. And not surprisingly, that had happened for me when I checked that, or what I thought was my final, check of achievement. I had the private practice. I was able to move to the city that I thought I wanted to live in, which was Philadelphia, my hometown at the time. I had a successful relationship, right? I should be happy. Yet I was so deeply disconnected and unfulfilled at that time. And again, just to use this language, why? Because the self that I was operating on, right, that was endlessly seeking to use achievement to fill a deeper hole, which began, love the presence of remothering, within my first core relationship with my mom. I was seeking that from outside of myself. So, not surprising that when that self, right, as it never does,
Outside
it
in.
never fills that hole. When I came kind of crashing down to that realization, really is what allowed me then the opportunity to really look into some of these patterns, not only just in my mind, but in my body, why I was so disconnected, and then obviously create some major change.
Nicole, what I'd love to do now is take what I just heard you say to the best of my memory without rewatching the video and shape it a little into the remothering work. And then please, though, if I misparaphrase, let's make this a dialogue. So what I'm hearing you say, first of all, and I'm maybe working from backwards forward, which is the last thing, which is coming from the outside in versus the inside out. And that to my filter of hearing is like the remothering work itself. It's just like when we can shine from the inside out, when we can feel safe from the inside out, so much more is accessible to us. And then what I heard you say, not in these words specifically, which was the mental gymnastics that we do to try and feel safe in our family of origin system can we're so busy doing them that they can create blind spots in what's actually happening. And then what I'm hearing you say, and this is something we talk about a lot in the master class, which is like there's an of courseness to the adaptations that we've created. And you just explained the of courseness, like why we have them, the accountability that comes once we can see them, but then also the like it's both the compassion, of course, and then the accountability to change at the same time and holding the both is what I think I heard you say. The other thing you said that I'd like to pull on the egocentric, and you wrote about this in the Orange Book, and I wanna just really underline it for folks, how different egocentrism of someone who's age under 7, who believes that if I'm holding up this clipboard and I ask you, "What do you think I'm looking at?" If I'm 2, I'm gonna say, "I think you're looking at a blue cover," but if I'm 8, I'm gonna say, "I think you're looking at the tan background." So when you're talking about egocentric, I think based on what you wrote in the Orange Book, you're talking about that thing that you think that what I see is what you see because I'm not old enough. Different than egocentric when we're like, "That person's so egotistical." Like, am I getting that right?
Yeah, I
And then
appreciate you
I'm
making that distinction too, because I think the word ego, again, is thrown around in a way that can be very unhelpful, though is really important. Though, yes, it's kind of the self-focus, the inability to, and I can actually make an argument, again, tie this all into the nervous system, that we retain that inability to see others' perspectives, and we are actually physiologically unable to see another's perspective when our nervous system is activated. And I'm gonna
oh
tie this
my
all
god.
together, when we're unsafe. And going just to tie all your concepts together, because
Yeah.
interestingly enough, they all connect again. When we sort of this idea, right, of outside kind of even having an inside, right, and an internal, sense of self even, and how for so few of us, and again, when we didn't have the safety in childhood, this ties together, right, to this adaptation, this outer focus, even a focus in the mind, thinking our way through life, when we didn't have that core safety in our physiological body, we didn't have another nervous system to co-regulate with when we needed it. When we didn't have another nervous system when we were upset to be curious about what we were thinking and feeling and allow us to explore our emotions and help us find our way to the ways that we could feel safe that might be different, right, from the adults around us. When we didn't have that, and this was again very much my story, I had a physically present mom who cared for me in a very physical sense, coming from a very Italian household. She loved to make sure there was always food on the table and like caring for me very surfacely. But my emotions, because her own disconnection from her own emotional world passed on from her family experience, felt unsafe. So, for many of us, the first adaptation that happens is my body, where my emotions are housed, is not a safe place to be. So, I need to, distract myself. I need to become hyper vigilant, tending, right, to create safety now in my environment, to, somehow think I'm creating then safety in myself, with really the simple message being, I'm not safe actually to return my attention and to begin to explore my internal world. It feels overwhelming, let alone my emotional world that I don't feel I have the trust. Back to that quote from the Orange Book, right? I don't have the trust to actually explore my emotions. So all
Mm.
of these adaptations, in my opinion, are born out of that lack of safety and security. So much so that you could hear me talk, and I'm sure you might hear this too in your community. Like, okay, like I understand I have to go within and explore and know me and create this, emotional safety and security. Like I heard this, I know this, I'm even, wow, people are doing it and gaining benefit. When I try to do that, and this is what I was met with as a clinical psychologist, right, who should know how to navigate my emotions, what was housed in my body was so overwhelming,
Mm.
and I didn't have the emotional bandwidth, the stress resilience, the tolerance, the ability to regulate or co-regulate, because that felt unsafe, because that was unfamiliar, because I never had had that experience. So in practical lived experience, right, this is where that disconnect happens. I know what to do, yet I don't actually physiologically set myself up. And this is again why I will always emphasize, and even this new book is really heavy focus on the body and the nervous system. Until I
Mm.
create that foundational safety, you could tell me to go within until you're blue in the face, and it won't feel like a safe place for me to be until I actually create that safety for myself. So, let alone my relationships aren't going to feel safe. So we set up again that recipe to feel like to back ourselves into a corner where we have no choice but to rely on those old ways, screaming and yelling, right, when we're dysregulated, distracting ourselves, scrolling on our phone when our partner's trying to share something emotional, or like me. I remember many moments when I first met my partner, Lolly, she'd be like, Nicole, like, wait, like, are you there? Where are you? I was a million miles away, dissociated, disconnected on my spaceship, or we're that fawner, that people pleaser, right? Endlessly scanning and tending the caretaker to the world around us, right? Because that is our only way. And some of us wear that as our identity. I become
Yes.
the caretaker, really, because that's the only way I've learned how to feel safe in my
And
childhood.
I'm so glad that was actually the part there was 2 things I wanted to pull from what you just said. One was the safety of exploring our own emotions. There the those of us that are very in touch with our emotions, but would not feel safe to tend to our own emotions because we must tend to the emotions of everybody around us in order to feel safe. And I think I really want to underline that one because I was well into my adulthood and my healing journey before I realized that that was not good, and I wasn't being a good girl, good girl person. I was, like, literally I had to create this image in my head of, like, bare hand like, reaching for an emotional turd, like, without thinking about it to stop messing like, so boundary impaired and so leaky, but I thought I was so good. So, as I was hearing what you were saying, the unsafety in the body, some of us do know what the feelings are, but we are so unsafe to feel our own feelings when we feel like it's safer to feel the rest of the room's feelings and manage it so it doesn't get, like so the other people don't flip their lids around us and then we're not safe. So that was one thing I wanted to name for the folks that are hearing. The other thing I wanted to ask is the tools for the body. You talk about in the Orange Book, there's tools, and on your Instagram, there's, ice wrist bath, and you mentioned in the forward or in the description of this book, I heard heart coherence, so that makes you think of heart math. But so I wonder if there's any tools that we can. So those were the two things from that.
Yes, I'm very much in no surprise again that I became, right, a clinical psychologist. I sat in a room and my job was to explore and tend to what other people's feelings. Right. So, so much I'm resonating to this idea because I very much, have very conditioned what I would call good person beliefs. That to be caring and compassionate, a good partner, friend, sister, daughter, whatever it might be, whatever kind of role you play in your world with others,
Yes.
meant to serve them. And again, this was again born in my
Yes.
childhood where because of that dependency on my mom and because of things that she said and did and ways she carried herself, always worrying about how people would perceive her. Before long, my filter that I didn't even know I was running my choices through, right? Similar to you, I might have had an instinctive like what I might want to see or do or happen, even if I was like somewhat aware of it. That would have been overrode so quickly with the tape playing out of, well, how would this be for the other person? And how will this be if I say this? And oh, if it'll upset them or for me, disappoint them
Disappoint.
like
Yes.
directly said, it can be just indirectly felt, right? If you're praised or, someone's present to you in when you are, tending to your siblings or someone else, and then or expressing a certain feeling or a certain attribute of yourself for me achieving. My mom was very present. She was cheering me on at the sidelines, whether it was academically, celebrating my report cards or athletically. So it was so much more kind of covert or behind the scenes than directly. And so in other instances, when I was being a different way or expressing things, it was a look or just a distance or, a lack of communication.
A phone call. Did you see so and so? She was being selfish. The thing you should never do is disappoint. The thing you should
Yes.
also never be is selfish.
Yes.
And you could hear the
Yes.
phone, like this is the 70s, so you can hear the calls, and it's
Yes.
like blah 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 blah. Blah, and so they didn't even volunteer as a homeroom. So selfish.
Oh,
Like
yes.
it's like
Yes.
so
And I'm
like okay,
happy.
so note to self, you gotta volunteer the thing. You
Yes.
know.
And so interestingly, and this was again nothing I would have had awareness until I really understood the body. I love this idea even of I love the you Simona used the language of selfish, right? Because what I've come to realize is that when I thought I was marching around loving and being compassionate and a good person, in reality I was just really self-focused because what I was doing was managing my own discomfort and showing up in particular ways so that I didn't feel uncomfortable or I didn't run the risk of losing this connection that actually mattered to me. And what I've come to realize as to actually be, and this is really the premise of this new book, How to Be
Yeah.
the Love You Seek, right? How to create an authentic, loving, interdependent relationship, we have to actually be caring for ourselves first. Again, it's the cliche I think that we all love to hate, and I think it took me actually a moment recently when I realized this idea of right putting my oxygen mask on first. We hear that right in the airplane, if those of us who fly, and it really is as simple as well, yes, because if I'm not alive, I can't care for the passenger if it's my child. I mean, really as simple as that next to me. So again, this idea of being good is tending to someone else or being, selfless, and that's important to avoid being selfish. Actually, we're unable unless our physical needs are being met, unless we're able to remain in that calm, grounded state, or at least within reach of it, like the quote you read at the beginning, we're actually not. And so the book will practically, and I'll go quickly into those tools in just a second, but
Yeah.
we're not going to be able to be connected to our heart. And our heart is where we are not only able to express our own truths, right? Our heart is so energetically powerful that when we're safe, we create now a safer environment. We send those signals to our loved ones, allowing them to be able to relax into themselves and to be then a compassionate, right, partner, loved one, or whatever it might be. So the tools then practically, and
If
I go through them and
Yeah, if I may before we pop into tools, there's one
yes,
thing
of
I wanna
course.
underline, and it's just repeating what you just said, but I really love that because in the beginning, we were talking about the roles we play and do we know who we are? And again, it's just talking about, like, do we realize that the thing that we're doing to be a good person is to survive? And so we actually appropriately are self-focused because we're self-survival focused. And then once you realize it is actually self-focused, not other focused because you're trying to survive, then you actually can be like, "Oh, but wait, there's different tools available to me now than there were when I was young." So I really love that you name it. When I realized that my goodness was self-survival and actually was the thing I was most trying not to be, which was selfish, like, it gave me so much power back to lean into tools. So I wanted to name that as we're getting ready to lean into some of the many tools. Everyone can read the book to get all the details, but the juicy something as we're talking directly to Nicole. We can't believe we are.
I think it's important. Thank you, Simon. I think it's so important to emphasize too that the tools are practices grounded in new choices. And I'm being really intentional with saying
Love
this,
those
right?
words,
Because
practices
you
grounded
could,
in
again, you could read these ideas, you could say, sign off on this very beautiful, experience that we're having here together and, be really affirmed that this is now, for this conversation, right? Okay, it's important that I start to care for myself. I understand that's how I used to, be safe and it's not actually caring for you at all. Okay, so now I'm going to make some new choices. In reality, we're not wired to desire change. We love the predictable. We love the familiar. Again, like I said earlier, it gives us a sense of control and we've already rehearsed what we do next and right, we've become comfortable and habituated to that. So
Yes.
the reality of change is much more difficult than just wishing or reading a book with some good ideas. It's actually about creating the space in real time, which in my suggestion is can needs to happen to be of greatest benefit more consistently than in the moments where the person's calling us and we're going to be faced with either choosing ourselves or choosing them. And a lot of us wait for those pivotal moments, right? To then put ourselves on a spot. And in reality, and again, I'm going to tie this all back to the nervous system, we're not going to be able to. When we are dysregulated and in a trauma response or in a stress response, we actually lose access to even for some of us, the ability to recall this beautiful conversation and the thing we should do. And if we don't have the practice of having some new neural networks and some new emotional or stress resilience that we can create, and I'll go into quickly what the tools could look like, unless we're doing that more consistently than not, we're going to set ourselves up. And the reason why I'm bringing this up for a shaming experience, then we feel like, well, I knew better.
Yeah.
What the heck is wrong with me? Maybe I am as unworthy, broken, or whatever it is the language that we've learned to call ourselves or identify, right? Maybe
I
I ought
love
to
that
just
you
be
name that
a
because we
caretaker.
are all going to hit spots where we forget to reach for the tools, and I really love that you name that, and I feel like I can hear your voice saying this, so I don't know if I heard this on your Instagram or if it's just something that I pulled from everything and made up. So I may be misquoting, but like the idea that resistance can show, even the not wanting to practice is so part of the rewiring that we're doing with the work that you teach. And that is part of also the remothering work. It's back to that of courseness. There's an of courseness. There's both an accountability and a compassion that this makes sense. So, and then also a please to ourselves. Please do the one thing, like just 1 minute a day if you
Mhm.
can, and not get upset with yourself if you don't, but just keep trying until you get the momentum to go.
I would actually suggest that that is the way to navigate that inevitable pull back to those familiar patterns is to commit. And again, some of us for very understandable, well-intentioned reasons, right? Most of what motivates us to change is we've hit that wall, right? I'm crying in my oatmeal. Like, are my relationship exploded or imploded for the last time, right? We feel compelled that life cannot continue. We're in such a state of suffering. Our relationship, is such a state of suffering. We're emotionally exhausted, right? Because we've been putting people above us and being this good person for so long, right? We're so depleted that very understandably we think, logically that, well, okay, if I just start doing everything that I'm going to share that we can do right now, I'll get better quicker. But in reality, what we're doing is we're just moving ourselves so far out of our familiar zone. And if we don't have the tools, like we're kind of continuing to define, all of these roles, all of these ways we've coped and navigated our overwhelming emotions and our nervous system has become habituated to, have been adaptive. right? So now we are jumping off into the deep end with no emotional bandwidth or ability to tolerate the overwhelm that's going to naturally happen. And we're going to create the recipe to return right back to the old
Mm,
familiar ways we've dealt with. So I would suggest very small promises, and they would be, again, consistently. I mean, and this might sound really silly and as simplistic, and I don't mean to offend anyone, to live in a body every day, to become aware, right, that we're in this physical vessel that, in my opinion, has some core needs. We all need oxygen and water. Our cells just need both of those things. We need nutrients. Similarly, our cells and all of the cells in our body need fuel or energy. We also, our muscles need to discharge energy. We're wired to be able to walk long distances. I mean, I understand we all have different abilities in terms of our physical body, though we need to somewhat be able to expend energy in some way. And we need rest and restorative sleep at night. And that's universal. I don't care where you're tuning in from. All of our bodies are wired in that way. And so for many of us, again, just using myself as an example, so I did not mean to offend because I was not living in a body. I was living distracted, either endlessly obsessed with my mind, which was either weighing worries and concerns and, predictions of the future and plans and shoulds, how I should show up so no one is
mm.
disappointing me. Or when that got to be too overwhelming, my nervous system did as all our nervous systems will do, it shut me down. I went away on that spaceship where Lolly's like, "Where are you?" Right? And I wasn't
In your
physically or
body. I
attentionally
love that you
connected to
name
my
that
body.
because, yeah, I grew up in a family where sleep was like, "Don't be lazy. Don't be lazy." This 8 hours of sleep thing that they're talking about, that's for lazy people. It was so not welcome in the house. You need to be achieving in these times. So when you said just be in your body, well, of course, you get to the point of complete exhaustion after just pushing, and you don't even know that you have a need, and then you're putting that need on other people. So I love that it sounds so simplistic, and it is so deep, really, to remember that we're in a body every day. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, so much more complicated because very few of us have learned a healthy connected relationship with the physical body. I mean, not to go down a whole nother rabbit hole, but right, we have so many messages from society, from media about bodies. We're modeled relationships with bodies. For so many of us, our body just doesn't, whether it's because of what's going on within it or the messages that we've received about it, is the last place that we ever wanna be given attention to. So, I really wanna honor, again, the complexity of, what can sound so "Oh, just connect with your body." It's so much more loaded than that,
So
and
loaded.
so very few of us have had a model of individuals who have a truly connected and healthy relationship, and then, obviously, you heard me say, right, nutrition. Now there's a whole right? That then opens up,
And if
all
you
of the
want to read
different
more,
ways, right, that
the
we can be
orange book
modeled,
has
though
it.
unhealthy relationships with eating, right? And how many of us have been taught, ways, and we use, even continue, as I once did for a very long time, especially around sugar, as a way to navigate my emotional world. So again, what can sound like an easy
Yeah.
task isn't. It's loaded. We have so much that we've learned from people outside of ourselves, from society at large,
Or
about what it means to be in a
adaptation.
body, about what our body, is, and how we can navigate it. For me, the biggest lesson I learned and shift I made is I wasn't able to honor my body's needs, especially when they differed, because I did come up, right? In that Italian household, we shared meals. We all ate the same thing at the same time, right? And I got very much used to, especially around medical and health concerns. That's how I learned to connect with my family. I got used to looking outside of myself, whether it was for something like, well, what time's dinner and what should we eat? And what do you want to eat? And I don't know what I want to eat, or help me tend to my emotion, my physical issues. I'd call my mom well into my 20s, and I knew what I needed to do to take care of my physical, right? All of these ways that I didn't actually ask my own body what I
Mhm.
wanted to eat, what it needed. And the reality
Wow.
is our body contains so much of that wisdom. So we can begin to refocus attention, to get really practical on it, really attune to what our body is, begin to ask those consistent daily questions, right? What do it just this is perfect, what is good, right? What do I need to eat?
Mm.
Regardless of what's happening around me? Do I need to rest now? Regardless, this is a big one for me, achieving. Especially I live in a home with my 2 partners, we're on different work schedules. In the beginning, it was very difficult for me to give myself a much needed day off or hour off if they were working. because I should be doing what you're doing,
I
right? So
know that
all of
one
these
so
ways, again, I'm just
well.
giving some examples of, right, we're outsourcing our
Yep.
body's needs to someone else. So that biggest shift, right? I have a body. It
Have
has
a body.
needs. Those are the core needs. I can start
Ooh.
to attune to what they are. And the more I do, the more likely it's going to feel safer and safer to then really dive into my
Mm.
emotional world and all of the deeper stuff.
You know what? I'm looking at the time, and a part of me wants to hear the tools, but a part of me knows that everybody can read. There's the orange book, there's the workbook, there's the how to be the love you seek. You have so much incredible information on your public social media pages that's free and accessible. You have the Self Healers membership that opens 3 times a year that people can join. So I don't want to be dangling a tease about the tools, but there's a question I have for you that I don't know if it's in the book or not, that I wonder if we can explore and just know that people can get other tools, which is we talked about creating relationships with our internal community, and we touched on a lot of that today. And I am going to make it the jump leads to collaboration and co-regulation with others that are on their own journeys. But the place that I am curious about is where we choose to be for any reason. There are many reasons people may choose to be in a high vigilance, like a relationship that cannot be low vigilance because we can't make somebody else do their work. That is boundary impaired and leaky, and they may not even want to do their work. But we still want to choose to be in relationship with them for a myriad of reasons. We all have our own reasons. Those relationships are really freaking hard, and these tools don't necessarily. I mean, taking care of ourselves applies, but the co-regulation doesn't apply, the interdependence doesn't apply, and I'm still real sticky with this one personally.
I can actually weave some tools into this
Mm,
answer
thank
very
you.
beautifully because it does lend to it. Because again, the reality of it is we can't, whether it's the partner we've chosen to be with. And there were a lot of dysfunctional patterns when Lally and I first, were together that I carried from all of the past relationships, my family being the predominant one that we've had to unlearn individually and as a couple, though the
Yeah,
reality is we can't change others, right? And there's
yes.
a lot of patterns that are still alive in my family of origin, and they've, are healing in a lot of ways. And, there are still patterns in families, in relationships. And again, saying that to say we can't change other people. What we can do, right? And again, this is where tools can come in outside of those foundational. I have a body, right? Let me make sure I'm paying attention to what I'm eating. Am I releasing my energy and resting as I need to? All those things that'll create that foundational safety. Really about attuning when I'm in a stress response, right? When I've
Mm.
reached my physical limits, my emotional energetic limits, right? When there is too much overwhelm happening, and again, while I think instinctively we love to, as I know I did, point the finger, if you would just stop, if you would just change, right? Though again, the reality of it is what is important in those moments is not only, again, here comes the body again, to attune to my body so I can feel my stress level increasing. I can feel whether or not I have the resources even to engage with a communication or a conversation in this moment. Not to say that I won't revisit it at a time where I'm more grounded, right? These are some preemptive things. I can quite simply check in with my body and we can use kind of markers because certain things shift and the most simple things that shift when we're becoming stressed. And I'm sure all of us listeners can relate to the moments where my heart starts to beat real fast, right? Or my breath quickens and I'm almost like heaving
Oh,
out of my
yeah.
chest. Or with those muscles, I start to feel tension. I'm clenching my jaw, I'm clenching my fist, right? Those are all markers, paying attention to my muscles, how tense or how kind of loose or easeful do they feel? What about my breathing? Is it really quick or is it deep and even from my belly? And how about my heart rate? Is it pounding out of my chest or is it more or less my normal rhythm? I'm shouting those areas out, right? Because again, the first tool will always be awareness. Let me check in to see how stressed I am. Because if I'm too stressed, my best choice might be not to answer that phone call right now, right? These are what boundaries are, not telling the person not to call. And I better put these boundaries in place with my family. We had a relationship based on stress. And now we very much have a nice boundaried, more interdependent relationship, though for
Mhm.
decades there was an urgency of phone calls and a felt pressure, I would go to bed with my phone next to my head in case something happened and I had to be on the other end of it.
Could I just
Wasn't
dig into that example for just a second? So in that case, the phone call, if you would only pick up the phone, then you'd be good and all would be well, right? So that's like the other person coming at you. Well, you also have an instinct, well, you may not. I have an instinctual, like, in order to be good, I have to pick up the phone
Yes.
or I'm going to disappoint my mom. My internal community was like, you have to do this or you're going to be disappointed. I'm certain there would have been a point in my own journey where checking in my body would not have been enough because that part of been like, Mingity, you cannot disappoint your mom. You may think you're a grown ass woman, but I know you're not. And I know you have to pick up the phone. I'm wanting her to not calls or to not want me to have to answer the phone. My internal community is wanting me to not want to answer the phone. But I guess all of what you just said still applies, which is
It really comes down to, in my opinion, again, a very, I think, an unpopular opinion, quite often a difficult. We have to learn how to tolerate the discomfort we feel, just for the sake of
ooh,
this conversation, when we fear and maybe are hearing. I heard, you can't do this to me. I can't tell you how many times when I first started to enact boundaries about how we feel when we're disappointing someone. That's our discomfort. And it's not to say that we might not
mm,
get that validated right back, that we're terrible. And so it's taking the space, making the choice, even though the internal monologue and your body, right? This is where it gets confused, because what we've learned to call our what has become instinctual, and some of us, myself included, are inaccurately calling our intuition, is actually our just instinctual behaviors, right?
mm,
Grounded in those conditioned roles. So we have to distinguish that. And for a lot of us, again, this all comes back to our inability to tolerate the uncomfortable feelings in our body and thoughts in our mind, because again, you're gonna feel very uncomfortable. I know I did when I started to actually put boundaries up and say, "No, I'm not available for, the family dinners that happen every week," or, "No, I can't be available for, every health crisis because I'm building a business over here." And, right, there was, again, not only my internal discomfort. I we just did a, I don't know if it went up yet, but a TikTok where, it's kinda like the thing where you put your boundary down or you turn your phone off and you throw it across the room, you don't wanna look at it again because you feel so uncomfortable. And I still have moments where I am faced with enacting a boundary, creating space for myself in my personal or my professional world, and it feels deeply uncomfortable. So again, I just wanted to say that
oh,
because we do have to learn how to tolerate whatever discomfort, whether it's, for us, it's disappointing people, for others, it might be coming from some other place. But again, this is where those tools come into play. We have to
so
learn how to breathe through that discomfort. We have to learn how to refocus our attention away from all the thoughts that are shaming ourselves, right? We have to actually learn how to embody the discomfort and navigate the discomfort in a different way, or else you're right. We're going to go right back down the instinctual road, wishing someone would just change. So I didn't have to. We have to empower ourselves to not have to, by making the choices, right, to actually regulate through the discomfort that many of us are trying to avoid.
I'm so sad we have to begin to
Mm.
end, but as we begin to end, there's a couple of things I wanna wrap through what we with what you just said because I don't wanna lose them, which is one, and I keep my eyes closed so I don't lose my thoughts, which is there was one, which is to be able to tolerate this discomfort and how absolutely everything that message is, and it ties back to what you said, it's nowhere in a body. It ties back to literally everything we've just talked about. So it's so incredibly powerful. And even pulling in what we talked about earlier, of course it's gonna be uncomfortable. This is so uncomfortable, but I'm here now. I've got you. I've got you. And we get to hear ourselves, even if we didn't have that growing up, or if we did, we may have had it and we still get to be there for ourselves. Whether, again, not a report card on what we did or didn't have before, but we can do that for ourselves now. Yes, this is uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable. The other piece I want to pull in was our the when you mentioned our instincts. And the reason I want to pull that in is I want us to just name for everybody listening, like, yes, we reflexively think that might be our intuition, but we can really slow down and know the difference between like, oh, my intuition is telling me that, like this quick answer versus am I, and these are all things Nicole had already just said, but like, am I breathing slowly and into my belly when I'm hearing my intuition, or am I breathing fast? Because that's not your, if you're still in that state, that's not your intuition, but you can trust your intuition. It's just getting back to what Nicole just said, into our bodies and into really noticing. And then is how you can know if the quiet inner whisper of your body is your intuition versus your programming. If I'm
So beautiful. We have to be in a calm, grounded body. We have to be able to even safe enough, right? The body has to signal safety so I can turn my
Mhm.
attention to hear, and I like to just, if, kind of for a quick practical takeaway and then one quick personal note, just to acknowledge the journey nature of all of this, though when we kind of if we're able to even drop in and connect with our heart again, that's assuming that we've created enough safety, right? And if you were to think, and anytime we feel right, that phone rings and we clench, and even we're still instinctually going to pick it up, but we're clenched because we're thinking, oh, I wish they wouldn't need me right now, right? Constriction, tightness, tension that a lot of times we can feel
Mm,
on our chest is again often a sign that we're in that threat response, right? When we're feeling open and airy, and some of us can feel tingles, right? Those are usually really simple markers of that safer
mm.
space. And just one quick aside, really interesting and not a coincidence at this conversation. So just this morning, actually, and I just want to again illustrate, as I often speak from my own personal journey of how it does continue, right? I can share all of this. I can say all these ways I've made progress and new boundaries I've had, and right, I matter and I don't have to be good and I can tolerate this disappointment. Just this morning, I was talking to my partners about some future hypothetical where I could hypothetically be put in a position to either honor my needs or the desires of someone, working with a collaborative partner that I very much respect and want to show up in a supportive way for, though imagining a scenario where those are at odds, given other contextual factors that don't matter for this thing. And I was sitting there being coached by my partners because I was feeling bad and not wanting to hypothetically disappoint at this future time. So just using that as an example to illustrate, I am not beyond, I am still too, right, on the journey. It's still as alive
Thank you
as of this
so much.
morning where I'm still worried about even if and it's like a no-brainer, the circumstance where yes, I would honor and care for myself, yet I still have that instinctual tug of, well, what will they think and how will it be? And I don't know if I can do that, even though I've given myself so much practice in doing that. Again, just to highlight
Thank you
the practicing of
so
tolerating
much.
discomfort, it continues. It's deep rooted.
It's a
It's
practice,
difficult.
what
It's a
you just said.
practice.
And no myth of arrival, which is what I just heard you say. So thank you for the no myth of arrival, for the practice, and then ending on a remothering moment, if I may, which is like, yeah, this is uncomfortable. And yeah, this showed up again. How human of me. I got you. Or in this case, you had a beautiful opportunity to have a co-regulating moment with two trusted others, which is magic when we have that. And what a beautiful way to end that, back to that third intention, which is just enjoying the moment of being in connection and community. I don't want to say goodbye. I actually have tears. Wait, I gotta breathe. I wasn't expecting. Oh dear. Oh, I think it's because I was just talking about being connection and community, and yeah, there can be little mini griefs when we say goodbye, and that's real. Nicole, this was an absolute treat. Folks, to find Nicole, do you I can tell them if you have to roll right away, or if you can tell them if you have time to stay on the line, how to find you and find your work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to thank you, Simona, for being so present, giving so much of yourself, being so
Mm.
transparent, and for the beautiful, beautiful community that you've created. And I know this will not, while it is goodbye, and I do want to honor that. I do think a lot of times too, speaking just in terms of relationships, we shame ourselves when we begin to make choices that sometimes means separating or creating distance or separating entirely from relationships, even if we've been the one from an empowered space making that choice for our own best interest, it still comes with moments of grief. And something I've very much learned is very uncomfortable for me, right? Are endings and are that sort of thing. So thank you for all you do. I know this will not be the
Right.
last time that we cross paths and collaborate. For anyone interested in following me, at this point, I'm pretty much there is a Holistic Psychologist account across every social media platform. So
Nice.
whether you're on Instagram, where it all began, or YouTube, or TikTok, or Threads, or God, call it the new X, otherwise known as Twitter, or
Mm.
all of the accounts. If you just want to give a search for our handle, is always some version of the holistic psychologist. So come follow. Providing these free conversations and free resources is always a priority. So we hope to continue to grow all of those social media accounts in terms of continuing to have these conversations, but also the
Oh,
communities.
beautiful. Well, I'm really looking forward to by the time folks are hearing this, the book will be out. So I'm really looking forward to reading it and grabbing those tools and implementing 1 minute's worth a day so that I
Right.
can build a consistent practice. This was an absolute treat. Thank you so much again for coming to talk to our community directly. It's really special and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Course. And thank you to the community. I want to end there for listening to conversations like this and being engaged in your own remothering process. Again, I can make a case, and I do in the book, that when we connect to our hearts and we become, we go through this very painful, difficult process of remothering, and we do become more connected to our intuition. We become more connected to our heart, and our heart is so powerful. So I always send a gratitude to everyone listening,
Mhm.
because in my opinion, this is how we are all doing our individual parts to create a more socially coherent and collaborative and compassionate and loving world that I truly believe humanity is capable of. So thank you all for sharing your
Yes,
presence and your
that
time and your curiosity with me today.
that is so beautiful. Well, Nicole, until the next time,
Till the
take
next
care.